playing with this unachievable kind of ideal. She doesn't shy away from that and addresses those things in the movie really well, and it's still just fun. That's what I've heard back from the conversations around it that I've monitored. Seems like a lot of people are just really love the movie. Think she did a really dynamite job with it. Because it could have just been a cartoon. I mean, that would have been the easy play.
I'm sure Mattel will enjoy the merchandise boost after this movie.
Yeah, I think so. It's going to become a cultural thing. And maybe just people were tired of not going to the movies and needed that big excuse, that finally after the previous strikes and COVID, people really are hungry to go out and do a movie. Although I'm still a little weirded out about the fact that people were doing both in the same day, because Oppenheimer's 3 hours and Barbie's a couple, so.
I tried to get tickets for Oppenheimer this weekend, but I wanted to see it in IMAX, and there was only one IMAX theater that was really far away, and they were booked completely yesterday. And well, all the good seats, I wasn't about to sit in the front row, and also Monday too, so I'm going to have to book for next week.
There's not one 1570 IMAX in all of Nevada. Is that crazy?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you'd think that Las Vegas would have some. Of course, I guess maybe the casinos say, no, we don't want you in a movie for 3 hours. You need to be on a casino floor. I wonder if there's a version for it for the Sphere.
I don't know if anyone knows about this, but I know there's a theater here. I wasn't even aware that they had a screen like this, but it's got 270 degree. It's a 270 degree screen. I've never even heard of that.
So we have a theater chain not far from us called Edwards. And Edwards, one of the interesting things about them is that they have all the formats. And so I didn't realize how many formats there were. Aside from IMAX and the straight, Academy ratio, there are movies that are done in like a kind of surround where they project not just on the screen, but on the walls next to the screen. And it becomes that wraparound kind of, not 270 degrees, I don't think, but it becomes a wraparound experience. They have most of those. And we saw Elvis in one of the ones that was wrapped around. It was an interesting experience. I'd never seen anything like that before. We enjoyed the movie, but you're watching the main movie in front of you, but there's somehow extra content that kind of extends the wraparound feeling. I enjoyed it.
What was the image quality like?
Very good. Surprisingly good. Yeah. When you darken a theater, I mean, a purpose-built facility, and you have projectors at that quality, there was no distinguishable difference between the main screen and the two side wings. And I know Edwards, I don't know whether they have branding for each of these. So you can go see the movie in regular, you can go see the movie in whatever this thing is called, or you can go see it in not Cinerama, but IMAX for the big experience.
Greetings and welcome to Office Hours. If you are new here and you want to learn a little bit more about what we do, head over to officehours.global. Our first hour, we answer your questions on media and digital productions. And on our second hour, that is when we take time to spend a little bit more time on a subject. And today, we'll be talking about AI productivity. What tools are you using? How is the workflow with some of these AI tools to help you to maximize your time and output? And speaking of output, let's dive into these questions, Bill.
Our first one, Liberty, comes from Mike Edwards in Brooklyn, New York. He says, "Morning, everyone. Would the panel recommend purchasing a refurbished, unclaimed Cisco Meraki Z3, or would it pose more of a security risk than anything else?"
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Man, I want that Meraki disco. So bottom line is that all of these switches and routers have to be DoD standard on wiping. So you hit that reset button and it's fully reset. It's supposed to go through all those factors to make sure that it does not have anything on it. If you're really concerned about it, I wouldn't buy it. But for the most part, if it's been reset properly, then there shouldn't be anything that should be concerning.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, Jeffrey's completely right. I think that if you pose very little risk by getting a reset version of this, but if I was doing something that I'd ever have to go back to a client, I would just buy a new one. Or if I had anything that was super secure, I'd probably buy a new one, just out of just covering all the bases. I think you really want to look at, you're paying a subscription. The Z3s don't cost that much money new compared to the other ones, at least. So I'd be be tempted just to buy a new one because I don't know how much you're saving for it. And then you would never have to think about that.
Next question.
Justin Blankenship is up next from Lebanon, Virginia. What would cause a live YouTube stream to seem sped up from what the live room feel was? My church band plays songs at a certain pace, which feels okay in a live setting, but when I rewatch it online, it feels faster.
Jeffrey?
So there can be a couple things that could cause this. The first thing, most likely, is the buffering from the machine that's streaming it to the internet to YouTube. So what a buffer will do is it'll make things speed up and then slow down. Another thing that could happen is if you have different cameras set up with audio and you're going through different types of audio with different bit rates to it and sample rates, and so it's basically just trying to catch up with the band. And usually when you see that, you'll see a lot of popping and skipping that's between camera to camera. So those are two different things. And then it's just, point of view when you're in the studio. Like, for instance, when I play with the band, I play a lot of music and then I come home, I've recorded it and I'm listening to it or watching it. And I'm going to myself, gosh, that's a lot faster than I expected, or it's a lot slower than I expected. So it's just that point of view that might just be getting you.
Alex?
Yeah, I would take a look at the frame rate that you're shooting the show on. If the frame rate doesn't match 30 frames a second, theoretically, YouTube should make the conversion of that. It shouldn't just speed it up. But if your frame rate is something like 25 or 24, it could be speeding it up to match that. That seems like an odd way. Usually YouTube will just add frames. YouTube always streams at 30 frames a second. So no matter what you send it, it's going out at 30 or 60 if you're doing gaming. So if you set it in the gaming mode, it'll do 60, but it's 30 or 60. Those are the only choices. So if you're shooting, a lot of times we see folks want to do kind of an art project, which is they want to do a 24 frame per second, but that just means you're asking YouTube to make up frames for you. So I wouldn't do that. And I know that you think that, not you, but people will think that it's that somehow has a film look. It just looks like 24 converted to 30, which is not a pretty look in my opinion. Now, YouTube may be speeding this up for some reason, but that would be, I think, the thing that I would look at the most. To figure out exactly what it is, what I would do is record it locally. So find something that's going to record it locally, and then look at it on YouTube, and then download the video on YouTube, put them both into your NLE, and see which one is longer. Specifically, which one is longer and by how much over 1 hour. So if you can do it for an hour, look at what the delta is, so that your local record gets to 1 hour. What is the what is the far record, what is the YouTube record at? And then once we know exactly what that delta is, a lot of times it's much easier for us to figure out what's actually happening.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Matt Wood in Newcastle upon Tyne. What is the best way of quickly grabbing some domain names if I'm not entirely sure how or where I'm going to host my website yet?
Great question, John.
After registering thousands of domains, I ended up at Hover because they're clean, no upsells, they're competitively priced, and haven't had any issues. So I use Hover for creating new domains, and I use WPX, which is WordPress hosting. Those are my two go-tos.
And Hover, HUB or someone?
HOVER.
Okay, perfect. Alex?
I also use Hover. I've used a lot of other things, and I have a downright dislike for GoDaddy. So those guys are the worst. Anyway, and then the old one was what was it? Network.
Network Solutions.
Network Solutions. Yeah, don't use those guys either. So so I don't know about the other ones, but I got into Hover, and it's just so easy to move things around. And yes, you've gotten to a point where we all arrive, which is that we buy lots of domains that we never use, but we can't give them up because they're aspirational. It's like buying books, except we pay $8 a year for them. And so we just sit there just going, oh, but I can't give that one up because someday I'm going to create that.
Someday, one day.
It's one day. Yeah, exactly.
What's the is it just ease of use, the difference between
same thing that John
GoDaddy?
said. It is there's no upsell. It's clean. The customer service is amazing. They are and it's the competitive pricing for what they're doing. They it used to be Two Cows, I think they rebranded it or they bought into it. And so but it's so that really it's just that it just works. It's you type something in, you can very quickly grab your URLs. It shows you the long list of all the URLs that you have available with that. That's the thing to also remember is that I make lots and lots of URLs that I'm only going to use once. So I know that sounds crazy, but I do events all the time, and I pop up to Hover and I buy that URL for a Halloween project or whatever. There's so many suffixes now instead of .com, .net, .whatever that I can just make them all. And I just make these little because I want them to be short so people can type them in if the QR code doesn't work or they don't have a way to do a QR code, which is what I use a lot. I make these little URLs and we just register them and then forward them to where we need them to go. And it just adds a little bit of quality to what you're doing. And people, instead of using Bitly or whatever, I still use Bitly if I'm doing something disposable. But if I'm working for a client, I will often build if we're building a show, I'll often build my own URL for it. It seems like a lot of extra, but it's like $8, compared to all the other costs that are involved with my shows. $8 is not going to be something anybody notices.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. What credit roll at the end of a movie had the most lasting impression on you?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I don't think there's a specific movie. There's several different. We have a fun little game, me and my wife, where we actually watch the credits and we look for names, and we just have because the biggest problem that we have is that the credit rolls get basically changed, and like if you're watching on TV, network TV, it's just going like 20 miles a minute, and you can't see a name. So we like to just watch all the credits and see names, especially names with my last name, her last name, and point those out, and then just some of the funny stuff. But I guess the first time we noticed this and started doing that, or I started doing that, was back when we were watching things like Airplane and Top Secret, where they'd put in funny little bits and pieces into the credits.
Alex?
Yeah, I think that the one that I find the most compelling was a series of unfortunate events. There was they retold the story in the credits with this 2D animation that was all done in After Effects, and it was just really, really fun to watch. And I just thought it was so artistic, and I actually saw a talk by the folks who did it. And it was like they did it over a week and a half in their bedroom, like it was, or their living room or something. It was just, they just threw together this incredible, piece. So I think that for closing credits, I think those are probably the ones that I thought were, I've always, when someone says, what is a great closing credit? Those are the ones I think of. I love ones that have, pieces of the movie or outtakes are a lot of fun. I think that probably the fun one that had outtakes that weren't actual outtakes were Hangover. So at the Hangover, they had the pictures that were on. They took, there was this infamous, night that they had, and they finally found the camera, and they said, we're only going to look at it once, and then they showed the pictures from the camera of their crazy night, as part of the role, and I thought that was really good.
Bill?
Yeah, all those things. I was going to say Airplane before Jeffrey stole my thunder, and he's absolutely right. For me, that was the one that said, oh, someone with intelligence can do something with the credits that make you want to watch them through to the very end. Most movies still to this day don't.
Yeah, I would say I can't even remember which movie started the whole idea of like watching till the end because there's the outtakes or what's coming next. I know it was way before the Avengers, but I can't put my finger on it who kind of started that trend. But typically when I'm watching, I am watching for, like Alex said, the outtakes, or do I know someone? I'm also looking at like locations, like where was this shot? Or, oh, I didn't know that Quebec. Oh my goodness, and just different places. So to this day, I will stay to the very last until the lights go up just to like watch and see everyone who, put in the work on the movie. Next question.
Next one comes from Alex Lindsay in Novato, California, and it's a self question. I have an Atmos Insta360 link update.
Ooh, Alex, go ahead.
An Atomos, and it is I can't get it to show any video from any webcam yet. So I just wanted people to know I have the webcams. I have the I just wanted to give an update because I've been asked like 3 days in a row. So instead of someone waiting for someone to ask, I cannot. So far, my Insta360 link turns on, moves around, and then turns off immediately. And that in the past has been a cable. But I haven't quite figured it out. I'm changing cables through, but I'm giving you some update. I'll give you some ongoing updates now that I have all the pieces in place. I'm going to try to change a bunch of the cables today and see if they get better. I might get file a ticket with Atomos and see if they have had any issues. But it's not just this camera. I haven't been able to get any of. I have all of my USB cameras tend to be a little bit higher end, so that might be a part of the issue. But I haven't been able to get any of them to see the. It says it sees 1080/30. I'm just not getting an image out of it. So we're going to keep on working on that. It looks like such a cool little screen, even if it doesn't work that way. I'm not sure if I'm going to give it back, but because it looks like it could be useful for a lot of other things for that price. But I haven't gotten it to do what we bought it for, so we'll see.
And can you give us the refresher of? So it's just you're just trying to connect.
So this is a Oops. Oh, this whole thing just came apart, didn't it? All right. This is the Atomos Zato, and it has the big thing is that it has. If you look at this here, it's got two USBs that should be in and out. It does matter which one. Number one is the camera, and number two is the computer. If you do it any other way, it doesn't work. And then it has this little. I think maybe I got this upside down. And then it has a PD, a power distribution. So there's the power for it right there. So I plug the power in here, and then I put the webcam into here. And then it should both send it to the computer and let UBC control it, as well as be able to go out HDMI. So I could theoretically see what's on the webcam, as well as being able to send it to my switcher, from an Insta360 link, which would be really cool. But not yet. So yeah.
We'll stand by. Go ahead, Alexander.
Have you tested it with Logitech cameras at all, or is it just Insta360 cameras that you're testing?
I have a Brio around here somewhere. I haven't used Brios for a little while, but I'll try to find a Brio, and we have a bunch of them at the office, and so I'll grab one of those as well, and see if those show up. I think it's good. It's a good idea. But yeah, I haven't tested it with that. I tested it with a Razer and with a Dell that I had here. So those are the other ones I've tested with. And so far, the other ones, the Insta360 just turns off immediately, which it does with with long cables. So I've seen that before. It feels like maybe it's not getting a connection through the monitor or something. The other ones are just showing up and they say 1080/30, like they're getting something, but I'm not seeing any video. So we'll keep on working on it.
Next question.
Next one comes from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. Has anyone recommendations for a system where people can pre-book and pay for Zoom sessions online, one-on-one sessions and research time and so forth? The museum wants to let staff be booked to help people.
I raised my hand on that. So I'm thinking that a scheduling tool, possibly something like a Calendly or an Equidity, could be helpful. I believe both of them not only have like their own standalone interfaces, but Equidity, you are also able to like embed that into a web page. So possibly testing out those. And I believe that there's a trial period for each. Check that out. And that, yes, so that could be something that is helpful for you to do those bookings in advance so that they can schedule, and it integrates directly into, like, if there's Google Calendar or whatever your calendar management system is, that it connects directly. So it also takes some of the legwork of having to, okay, they've booked on this web page, and then now you've got to set up the Zoom, and then now you've got to make sure that it gets on your calendar. So there are like plugins or apps integrations in there, excuse me, to set that up. And then you can also set up, I use Calendly, so you can also set up automations in there. So once someone has booked, then it will send them, so you can send triggers for like reminders, and also like at the end of the booking, whether you want to do a survey or follow up, like you can add all of those things. So yeah, definitely try those out and let us know how it works out for you. Next question.
Next one from Alex Lindsay is for me. Can Bill give us a summary of Comic-Con?
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, absolutely. So Comic-Con was definitely back this year. The last couple of years has been, we had the pandemic when they couldn't do it because of COVID and all the rest of that. Then the last couple of years, there's been mask issues. So the cosplayers who are really serious about dressing up and things like that were constrained by having half their face covered, those who did facial makeup. So yeah, let me give you a little quick tour here. I'm going to pop up. This is the San Diego Convention Center, a beautiful facility, architecturally, both interior and exteriors. You'll see a little later. This is across the street. This is called the Gas Lamp District. This is kind of, you can see how much money is spent on promotion for this event. They wrap entire buildings consistently. And when you get in close to the gas lamp, there's just tons of stuff going on. There's a whole interior of the convention center, and then there's a whole exterior. Here's a little triptych of the kinds of things. And I particularly wanted to point out the things like Interview with a Vampire on the left. They didn't have this year as much in the convention floor, but they had a whole pop-up experience. And I think in the marketing world, these are now called activations. First time I had heard that term. And activations, they build an entire pop-up. There was a whole Interview with a Vampire experience, and there was a line that was, they had all sorts of lines set up for people waiting to go through this particular thing. On the right, the escape game, this is also something in the gas lamp. So there's tons of stuff just for the community, even if you can't score a ticket for Comic-Con. And they're hard to get and increasingly harder. Let's go inside the show floor. It was crazy packed. This is one of, I think, 7 aisles that go the entire length of Comic-Con. You're seeing aisle 2300 there. But I'm going to take you next to Artist Alley. One of the things about Comic-Con is it always was to celebrate the visual arts. So artists literally set up booths in Artist Alleys. These are people that have fans that do it. Here's a quick picture of one of the comic book artists, Jim Benton, and he's sitting there actually drawing specific characters and things like that. And people can watch the process as it goes. You can meet, get autographs, and get stuff like that. Some of the larger companies, particularly from overseas, here's the Funko, an amazing booth set up, literally just tons of money. And as I noted, this takes care of the whole neighborhood around it. Here's part of the gas lamp. People are just kind of hanging out, watching people wander by. At night, there's all sorts of stuff to do. Here's one of the FX activations outside. I wanted to note, because we talk about it a lot, Comic-Con is one of the most universally welcoming things. I mean, I truly think that the nerds who were comic fans in the early days have grown up, and now Hollywood is all about this kind of content. But they've always been a very welcoming community. There's a huge disability thing that happens. They're very welcoming, and they have tons of people who do costumes and go to extreme lengths to make these fabulous things. So I've been going and taking photos for a long time. I try to have a theme because if I have a theme, at least I don't have to shoot everything. And this year my theme was full face makeup. It can be extreme like this or something more subtle but distinctive like that. And I'm just trying to shoot what I think are interesting looking photographs of people who have done full face makeup. So these are some of my very first days as I was trying to get my feet under me and decide what I wanted to do. One of the things I try to do always, Comic-Con's convention center is so cool. I try to work with the architecture and see if I can find things, characters and part of the architecture that go together and kind of form something that I can't shoot anywhere else. And these are just some of the people. We have normal, crazy, sometimes a little outrageous. I'm not quite sure what this character is, but it's pretty fabulous. So here's that's the group A. That was when I was getting kind of the traditional kind of cosplay things I do. Also wanted to note, I looked at that, I said a lot of men there, women there, not so many men. I did get a lot of men, but it's typical that you would see this. Also on the right of this, you can see the scale of some of these costumes. The guy on the right was on some kind of stilts on a very, very crazy thing that made him taller than everybody. And you see everything. One of the things, the guy in the top photo, I had to single him out because horror is a genre. This guy dragged a stuffed dog through the entirety of Comic-Con in this cosplay that was just outstanding. Okay, that's kind of the normal stuff. I wanted to go to day 2 and day 3 when I got really serious about finding some things. And this is me trying to find a cosplayer who I think looks great and take them into a location. The first one I was really delighted with was this shot. I don't know whether this is a particular character. I just thought she did such an amazing job of props and everything else, built this entire beautiful world around there. The other thing is I saw a woman who was kind of a natural theme, and I looked around and we were in front of the big concrete runway of Comic-Con, and I thought, can I find some greenery for her? I asked her to come out with me to the front edge. I found one palm tree and he was able to get this shot. I thought that was one of the nicest things that I was able to create through Comic-Con this year. Again, trying to work with the building and just see what people are doing, and you get these people who are outrageous. Okay, all that aside, I was walking through the main floor and I saw this young lady. And I thought, oh, the big studios are doing things because this was an amazing costume. Now, for those of you who don't know The Phantom Menace, this is the character kind of outfit from The Phantom Menace. She did her own version of this. I was wrong. She was not a professional. She was a young girl, maybe 16, 17 from the Midwest who came out to do this. And I asked her to come to an area and let me try to get some really serious photos. This is the first one I ended up with. These people are just unbelievable with the detail they put into this. She made literally every aspect of this. She sculpted the styrofoam insert and laid hair across it strand by strand. She sewed and created every single thing she's doing there. She defined her makeup, got her contacts, and she was just mobbed on the show floor. And she was very nice. I met her mom. Her mom and her brother and her dad were there supporting her in this adventure. So they were kind enough. I asked them, can you come with me and let's try to find some architecture and do some nice shots? So this is my next picture of her. You're honoring people trying to do the best they can with cosplay. And then I asked her something really crazy. I said, Dad, would you stand behind her to make sure she doesn't fall? But there's a 6-story escalator. And I said, I want to try shooting you while you go down the escalator backwards. And she accommodated me, and I ended up getting this shot, which I think is one of my happiest shots of Comic-Con, just because it shows how much time and effort people put into this sort of stuff.
Yeah,
so that's my
commitment is like, these are great images, Bill, like their commitment. And for those cosplay is essentially dressing up like a film book character, and just the detail. I'm always amazed at how much time and creativity they take, and you were able to capture a lot of that in these photos. So thank you so much for that, Bill. I know that John said
sometimes it's also just crazy. Had to throw this in. It doesn't have to be so serious. Sometimes it's just people having fun. All right.
Right.
Done.
Right. John?
I want to know what Bill's pitch is to these people. Does he get a model release from him, and how does he get over the creepy old guy trying to take pictures of these young people?
I've learned that over the course of time. And in this case, let's talk about Padme, because, she was surrounded by just tons of people. So you watch a little bit, and I thought I saw a woman and she had gone up to help her adjust something. I thought, that's her handler. She must be a professional. So I went and talked to her and I said, the other thing is I have on my phone some of my best pictures from past Comic-Cons. So when I approach somebody, usually I say, I have 2 pictures in particular that I think are very good and use the architecture. So I say, look, I'd like to try to get something like this. These are some of my earlier shots from previous years. And that usually lowers the temperature. They know I'm serious about taking a photo. And in this case, that woman I thought was our handler said, I'm her mom. And at that point, I connect with the mom, and then it takes away all of that. And her mom and her dad and her brother and I all escorted her. Took us about 15 minutes to get to the location I wanted to shoot her at, because she was stopped every 100 feet by more people wanting to take pictures with that fabulous costume with her. So you learn not to be, you learn how to do it right. You show them you're serious about the photography. You're telling them, I want to take you to this area because I think it'll make a great frame for you in your costume. And at that point, you can get buy-in. I had one turn down the whole 4 days I was there shooting pictures. So part of it's just attitude and how you approach people.
And for our producers, keep those questions coming. This is a great opportunity for us for this hour and going into the next hour. And remember, your votes matter. So go ahead and submit your votes for the questions that are in queue. Next question.
Next question comes to us from Häcken Forss of Stockholm, Sweden, doing sports broadcasting and currently use Audio-Technica's BPHS-1. I get some echo between the announcers sitting next to each other. Will the BPHS-2 help reducing the echo, or do you have other recommendations?
Go ahead, Alexander.
Yeah, so this is a good example of choosing the right mic for the right application. Polar patterns can make a difference. The S2 appears to have a hypercardioid mic. So hypercardioid mics, although they tend to have a larger rear lobe on the back, which means that you get less rejection on the back versus cardioid, but you can get better rejection on the sides. So if someone's directly beside you, that can help. That being said, having some form of dynamics processing on your mixer can help a lot, be it a downward expander or even better if you have auto mix. Auto mix is where we talk about this a lot on the show, but auto mix will make a massive difference when you have a bunch of open microphones. It will balance the levels between each presenter properly and bring them down in the mix when they're not actively speaking.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, just to expand a little bit on what Alexander was talking about is if your 2 folks are like this, make that a little thicker. If your 2 folks are like this talking towards the camera, that polar pattern that is kind of like a figure 8 here, like this, not quite like that, but it'll be, this is going to reject each other. Whereas if you have them, looking at each other and their headsets are here and here, that back polar pattern that's going there, maybe picking the other person up and crossing over. It was a horrible image. I apologize. I've never tried to draw polar patterns before. But the point is that right behind them is going to be, so if they're looking right at each other, you could have more problems if they're shoulder to shoulder. The mic, and I don't know if it would make any difference, the mic that I've usually seen at most of the broadcasts that we've done is the Sennheiser HMD 27, which is a little bit pricier than that one. But so I don't have as much experience with that mic, that headset. But I think that the Dugan Automix is going to be the number one thing that will fix that if you can get it applied to the system.
Next question.
Alexander Knight in Vancouver, British Columbia here on the panel says, I watched Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny yesterday. Thoughts on the de-aged Harrison Ford? I was, quote, impressed with what they accomplished. I'm unclear what method was used.
Alex?
So this was a secret for a long time, but you'll now see it in the credits. There's a company called Lola. And it's a Lola pass. And what they do, we're not totally certain, but they're really good at it. And they've been doing it now for, I think it's been 15 or 20 years. And it's actually hidden in a lot of actors' contracts that that Lola will be used for all of their, for folks that are starting to approach aging. They like to be toned up a little bit, by Lola. So Lola has been in their contract, and it used to not be something that was credited. But if you go back, I bet you'll see a company called Lola in the credits, because they've now started to get credited for their work. But for I think maybe 10 years they weren't credited at all. It's like a secret thing that would happen to actors quietly. And so, but they can get pretty aggressive about it. A lot of it has to do with just, it's not really as high tech. It's a lot of filling in a lot of wrinkles and smoothing things out. But it's a pretty interesting process. I think there's a good article maybe a decade ago that was written by Wired magazine about it. So if you go back and look for Wired and Lola, you probably find a great article about what they do. But I don't think they talk much about what they do, but they make people look younger. So that's their main thing.
Next question.
Tlaloc Lopez Waterman in Brevard, North Carolina, says Twitter is being completely rebranded. How is it for a small, medium, and large business to make a change like this?
Jeffrey.
First of all, I want to thank Alex for putting the song Lola in my head for the last couple minutes there. You gotta understand that Twitter.com is not going to go away. If he chops that hand off, that is going to be the major ultimate everybody leave sinking ship type thing. But you'll still be able to do Twitter.com/whatever and still get to right there. Now, on a branding aspect, I've always been told that especially if you take over something, that you usually give it a 2-year period and then you change the name. Elon's never been that type of person that follows those types of rules. So he's just kind of sped up this whole thing and given it the brand name. Anyway, he's got SpaceX, so why not regular X? I don't know, that kind of works there. But the biggest thing is I saw a tweet from Greg Gruenberg, and basically he explains what happens with X. And X is basically if it was a way to sign a document for anybody that was illiterate, couldn't write or anything like that. So are we seeing this type of unbranding? Is that the play on this? I don't know. We'll have to see. But for the most part, APIs don't change. Well, unless he makes them change. And you'll still be able to use Twitter.com at least for the next 5 years. And if, like I said, if they chop off that hand, that's where the mass exodus will happen.
Alexander?
Well, until this question was put in, I had no idea this was going to happen. So I'm going to stay out of predictions or why they're doing this, and answer it in the most generic of possible ways, because we've talked about branding on the show. Obviously, most people know branding is crucial to any business, whether it's small, medium, or large, and it can make or break the business. And we've seen examples in the past where rebranding has done very well for companies, and other times where it has backfired and they have had to make changes too. So that's all I will say about that. Whether or not it's going to work out for them, I don't think it's going to. If they're thinking that this is kind of like sweeping past problems under the rug, that people are going to forget about it, I don't think that's going to happen. So I don't really have any feeling about it either way.
John?
So note that Elon is trying to match WhatsApp in features. And so expect payments and all kinds of other features that Twitter never had, hence the branding. But now, what do we call tweets? That's my question.
Ooh, that's a great question, Alex.
I think that I really thought he was going to pull it out. I thought it was going to work. I thought this was going to work. I'm starting to even for me, I'm starting to wonder whether this is actually going to work out. There was something about changing the name, and some pretty just rough ads I've gotten, or rough stuff that I've gotten. And I'm starting to wonder whether this is all going to come out the other end. And I haven't really questioned it until this week. It was like, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. He'll sort it out. And I'm now starting to, I will stay, and we'll see what happens. I mean, we never know. And I'm pretty committed to it because it's really the only place I have a reasonable number of followers, and the followers are very dense. I haven't done any real work to gain followers. So I just say whatever I'm going to say. And so it's a very dense following, and I don't want to give it up. So I'm still hanging in there. But a little concerned now that it's just going to get to some point where we kind of it goes the way of MySpace, where it doesn't really go away, but we stop really paying attention to it the way we did before.
Oh, I love listening to all of those insights on what could and what Twitter's doing. And just to follow with Alexander, what he shared is I've been a part of a couple of rebrands. One at the governmental organization phase where government, some small businesses as well. And whenever an organization goes through a rebrand, there's typically that they've either changed either demographic, like audience wise potentially, or there's some services that they are now prioritizing over others. And because a brand is really what people say or know about your business. So we even saw most recently with Meta. So Facebook was the name while it was a platform, but all these other tools that they had housed under that. And then they said, no, well, you know what? Facebook is a item. We want to help people continue to maintain that that's what Facebook is. It's not the company's identity. So that's where Meta came in. So that's where they house all the other products and services underneath that. So anytime you're looking to do a rebrand, sometimes it could be a matter of weeks and months, depending on how much needs to be changed, how clear you are on the messaging that you want to put out. And sometimes it can take months, years, especially if there are more, depending on how many stakeholders, how many departments, and of course budget. So just going back to the question, what is it? The timing varies. It's all about getting as comfortable as possible that you are effectively communicating your identity, your services, what technology or anything like that you might change or you're making a pivot to, and effectively communicating that to your audience. Because with that, it could be things like the visual identity that you now need to go through research and user research and then getting new designs. Or is it really just as simple as, and I don't like using that, so let's strike that. Is it that you are, it's name, it's URL, it's social handle. So it ranges in complexity, but there's this checklist that you want to go through because you want to make sure that your audience is very clear on who, what, where, when, and that's kind of the nature of a rebrand and how many people are involved in that process. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. Are there any good alternatives to noip.com for redirecting dynamic IPs?
Jeffrey?
The one that I use is that a lot of people use is Cloudflare, and it's a great. I like it because it can do a lot more than just do the IP redirection. But you have like Amazon Route 53, I think it's called, Cloud DNS, Google Cloud DNS. Those are some of the options, and there's a list of them that you just have to do a quick search on, and you'll find some names. But yeah, Cloudflare is the one that I recommend.
Next question.
Eduardo Augustine, Panama up next. Any update on your Telestrator app, Alex? We're looking forward to it.
Alex?
Yeah, it's so close. There's a couple little weird, what's the last little bit? Everything works. There's just a couple little things that Wansi Riblitz and I are working on. We're just working on it. It's all, it's way better than I have ever had one of these work. It works well. There's a couple things on the iPad that we're trying to fix because I want to put it out as iPad / Mac software. And so getting that two things to work has been a little bit of there's just one little glitch that we're working on. But if you'd like to beta test it, you can ping me directly in Discord and we'll send you a beta.
Next question.
Rick Coombs in Columbia, Tennessee says, is there a way to scan a QR code that someone has sent to your phone from that phone?
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I believe that if you, it depends on I don't know how to do it on Android. On iOS, if you save it to Photos or Notes, you should be able to select the QR code in either Photos or Notes, and it will take you to the URL.
Next question.
Nice. Funsak Georgie in Dharamshala, India. We are buying a Behringer XR12. Can we control it with an Android tablet, or do we need anything between the XR12 and an ATEM other than the 2 XLR female to 3.5 millimeter stereo interconnect cable?
Alexander?
In these kind of scenarios, I always recommend getting some kind of bidirectional balancing box where you're not only matching gain, but you're matching impedances as well, going from consumer to professional levels. So something like the Art CleanBox Pro, that's what I use. It's very inexpensive. That works really well, where you can feed it a balanced XLR and then go really, really, really short unbalanced out of that into your ATEM. On the higher end, the Henry's Matchbox HD, Henry Engineering Matchbox HD will do that as well for you. It is more expensive, and build quality is a little bit better on those. The nice thing about the Henry stuff is that if you need to have multiples, you can actually get a rack mount unit because they are designed for broadcast environments. So presumably they would last a little bit longer. But the Art Box has been working fine for me, and that's what I usually suggest to people.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, the same thing. I actually had this conversation yesterday with my sound guy and for our band, and he basically just said, "Don't go cheap. You're going to run into too many problems." And I totally agree on that. There's certain things you can try to go cheap on, but that's not one of them. And just have a good connection. Make sure your cables are high end. They're not something that you've used for the last 20 years, and you'll be fine.
And Alex.
I would look really hard. I had an XR12 and then I got an XR18, and I would look at the XR18 really hard before I bought an XR12. Like, it's just, there's a lot more outputs, a lot more IO. It's a significantly better machine. I mean, it's not like a little better; it's a lot better of a box than the 12. So if there's any way you can afford an XR18, the XR12 will be what you need today. The XR18 will be what you need tomorrow. And the X32 will be what you need in a year. like that's so you just have to decide how many times you want to buy a mixer or how many times you might reuse it.
And a reminder to our producers, you can submit questions at any time. Next question.
Harkenfors, Stockholm, Sweden. Recommendation for a mic preamp to use with Magewell's ProConvert AES 67. And he's got a link there.
Alex?
Yeah, I'm just taking a look at it right now. It's hard. Let me get them right in the show here. Let's see here. This is so what you're trying to do is you need a balanced line input is what you need to convert to AES 67. That's my assumption here. So that you can't have it looks like it's not going to take, it'll take balanced or unbalanced. In and out, but it it needs to be a line level. And if you're trying to take a mic into that, one thing that you may want to look at as a simple box, but not necessarily the least expensive box, is the Sound Devices still makes, I believe, an MM1. And the Sound Devices MM1 is going to have a really great, so I'm just trying to find out how much it costs now these days. So the MM1, it's about $700. And so it's a little bit expensive. It's a really, really good mic preamp that is just going to do one thing. It's just like a drop box. You have your mic input. You can gain it up and send it out as a line output. And so that may be, I have to admit that's the only one I've used in the last 15 years is the MM1, and it works really well. It's built like a tank. I don't know of a lot of other ones that are just simple, a lot of other preamps that are just simple throughs of one mic in, line out.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. And he says, wait, am I in the right place? No, yeah, Harkenfors. Yeah. Now, Douglas Carmichael, with so many reports of 70 millimeter IMAX screenings of Oppenheimer plagued by technical issues, do you think that the film revival has a long-term future?
Alex?
Yeah, the 1570, which is where a lot of these technical issues are happening, is really rare. No one almost ever uses it. So it gets that projector gets turned on. That projector sits like next to the digital projector that's generally used for everything on an IMAX screen. And so usually the operators are using what are called DCPs. These are like these little blocks of data, little hard drives, and they drop those DCPs into the digital projector, and that's what goes out to the IMAX screen. In about a total of 55 theaters around the world and about 30 in the United States, they brought back these 15 perf 70 millimeter film. They are exceptionally hard to work with. And the machines haven't been used. They get used like once every 2 years. So like, because it's every time Christopher Nolan puts out a film, they run them through here. The operators, there's not that many operators that know how to put them together. They're just a really hard thing to kind of get working. So it's not in the first weekend. It's not. I'm sure that they had a couple bad. It was probably one of the first 4, is my guess, projections, probably the first one for most of these. So it was probably the very first time or the second time they got it going. It's because it's the first time because they didn't get it right, or it's the second time because it's the first time they had to flip in at speed, because the first one was probably set up days before because you got all the time in the world. There's no other projector using it. So the first plane probably went great. And the second one, they have a half an hour to get it back to where it needs to go. You got to remember, this is a 600-pound reel. This is not like a little thing to move around and it's not like you're pulling it off and putting it on and restringing it. It's a thing. And so, I think we want to be kind of, there were some technical issues in the first day. A lot of people complained about it on Twitter because that's what people do. And now it's fine. And it is blowing the doors off of every record that I think that, if you look at the numbers, it's making a lot of money. And so I don't think anyone's going to look at like, oh, we shouldn't do this anymore. If anything, I think that, theaters have to think about what it takes to put more of these really big, because I'll tell you, the theaters that have the 1570s, the Metreon, for the entire run, every single plane of the entire run, 10:30 in the morning, noon, everything is sold out. It's effectively sold out. There's some like front row seats in the corners that are open, but it's 80-90% capacity for every single plane at the Metreon. So I don't know if that, I think that if anything, it argues that we should do more film, for these. And if, I think that a lot of the film industry ought to think about how to do really, really high quality outputs for only a handful of films, because they're not going to be able to keep on doing lots of little ones. That's what streaming does.
Bill?
I read that the expectation for the opening of Oppenheimer over its first 2 days was 40 to 50 million. It ended up doing 80 plus $million. And I saw this in one of the trade papers. This is actually the big film. It barely fits into the platter. The thing is just massive. It's 11 miles long if you unspool it. The movies approaching, I think, are right over 3 hours in length. So yeah, it's not surprising to me that it's causing some technical glitches here in its rollout, but it seems to be crushing it out there. So all of you who bought into the Barbieheimer thing and saw both Barbie and Oppenheimer in the single day, bravo to you. You can tell your grandkids.
Alexander?
Yeah, IMAX seems to be doing really well. I have not been able to book tickets for this show, for the seats that I want. Most of them are all taken up, and I actually had to go 2 weeks out on the ticket site to try to even find it. So that says something. I don't think this is a portent of film revival necessarily, but when you're someone like Christopher Nolan, who has that gravitas, who has that pedigree, I think, if Christopher Nolan wants to do film, I think people will be interested in it, but I don't think it's something that's going to be widespread necessarily. However, I've always, as a film connoisseur myself, someone who loves older movies, I've always loved the way that film looks. I think there's always a space for it. I find it really interesting that people seem to want to add film grain back to things that are shot on digital to make it not look so digital. So it's kind of funny. We see this in the music production world as well. Why do we add, why do we add distortion to songs that were recorded digitally? Because it sounds pleasant. We're adding stuff back. There's obviously something missing, and people feel that it's necessary. So it's cool.
And Alex?
Yeah, I do think that it's. I don't think that it needs to be a film revival, but I do think that there's an argument that you could have movies that you've decided. Maybe it's only Christopher Nolan that gets to do these, or maybe one or two others that are really shot for that. But I think there's an argument to be shot for IMAX and really put out there. I will say that having looked at a lot of the more square frame, I know there's a real push towards 235 and all these wider formats. I really enjoy the square frame, that IMAX produces. I have found that I like that a lot more than I thought I would. It just feels more immersive on a really large screen.
And Alexander?
Yeah, just quickly to add to that, Alex, did you see Zack Snyder's Justice League, the new edit in the IMAX for that larger format? I thought it looked really good.
Yeah,
and he actually did a black and white version, and I thought it looked especially good in that format.
Yeah, I've always been kind of more of a widescreen person, and then for a long time, from a practical perspective, I was like 16:9, like just do everything in 16:9 because that's what it's going to end up in everywhere, and so we don't want any letterboxing. But I will say that there's something about that the IMAX format that's a little bit more vertical that I think is really compelling.
Next question.
Funchak Dorjis, back from Dharamshala, India, with high panels. What kind of mics would you use to interview two guests in a hotel room?
Jeffrey?
I'd go for straight up dynamics, SM58s on stands as close to the mouth as possible. You do not know what the room is going to do. And you could rearrange furniture and put up blankets and cover lights and all that other good stuff and still have semi good room acoustics. So a good dynamic microphone up at the face is always going to counter a lot of those little problems there. If you don't want to do XLRs, if you're looking for USB, companies like you get the hybrid microphones like the ATR 2100, I think is the number, or IK Multimedia has a USB, the HD rig, which you can plug in straight up USB and control from there. So some different options. Of course, XLR, I would go the standard SM58 with maybe a wind filter and a pop filter.
Alex?
Yeah, I definitely agree with the dynamic mic approach to that process. I mean, I think that I don't use the SM58s in a studio environment mostly because their high end doesn't. I can hear the difference in the high end, so they don't pick up on the high end as well. I would probably use a Heil PR40 or a Shure SM7B. Those would be the two that I'd probably lean towards the most as far as those goes. Of course, there's the RE20. So those are other ones, but the RE20 will be a little bit more sensitive to all of the stuff around you. What you don't want to do is do a large dynamic mic or a condenser mic because you probably pick up a lot of the stuff in the rest of the room. Where the dynamic mics will tend to fall, their off-axis rejection tends to be a little bit more. You have to get really close to that mic, but it definitely makes a difference. And just what I've learned is take the blankets off and throw them on the TV. The TV seems to produce a lot of reflection. So I've learned to take the blanket off the bed and throw it on the TV. And that helps a lot.
And Alexander?
Yeah, I actually use the Electro Voice RE20s. I really love them. Those are my go-to.
They're great mics.
Yeah, I did a shoot in a hotel with 3 people. Now, that hotel room was not too bad acoustic-wise because they had 2 beds and heavy drapes covering the windows, so that worked pretty well. But I had 3 people sitting on chairs side by side with RE20s, and it sounded really good. Off-axis rejection, I find, is pretty good on those mics. I will say with the variable D technology, it is a little bit more forgiving, which is why I tend to use it, because you get a little more room to kind of move around the microphone and not have it completely drop off the mic. So if you have somebody who doesn't have good mic technique, that's where the RE20 really shines.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, I've heard the Blackmagic Design Ursa Mini Pro 12K has IMAX level resolution. If you were going to use the 12K as a studio camera, what switcher would you need to get it into Zoom, Mimo Live, and so forth? Would the Constellation 4K suffice?
Alex?
Yeah, so I have both the Constellation and a bunch of the 12Ks. The 12K doesn't get out the camera. So the camera can shoot 12K and can also do 8K 120. But the most it can push out of the SDI is 4K 60. So 4K 60 is the maximum. So what you can do though is you could, for instance, shoot 8K 120, stream 4K 60, and then potentially rebuild it at 24 if you wanted to. So those are a bunch of different options there that might be possible. But you can't. All you can do on the 12K and 8K is record it.
John?
So I had my 12K connected to the machine for a while, and I hooked it up to the Web Presenter 4K. It didn't look great, and my Sony looks way, way better. So there you go.
And
I think that's color management too. I mean, like, so if it didn't look great, I mean, there's no reason why it can't look probably very, very close to the Sony. It's just that the Sony out of the box has better color than the Blackmagic. So there's something about the Sony one where you don't put anything on it. And you say, I just want video, and what, just video out of the Sony looks better than what comes out of the Blackmagic. But if you get a better LUT on it, one of the problems with the 12Ks as they relate to the switcher is that the 12Ks for whatever reason are not shadable, so you can't control color and shading, or you can control the aperture, but you can't control any of the color on the 12K. You can only do that with the Mini Ursa or Broadcast Ursa, which is I don't know what happened there. We just can't do it.
Next question.
Next one comes from L. Wilson Spiro in Berlin. He says, has anyone on the panel ever daisy-chained a bunch of DataPath FX4s together? What was it like? I know they have the capability, but I've never worked on a project that needed enough for me to daisy-chain them.
I have not tried that out, and I'm looking at, okay, Jeffrey?
So, no, I have not, but it feels like it's the same as if you take a bunch of ATEMs and put them together and then chain them up from there. For an ATEM, you also have the software that you can connect up to make some really cool switches from there. So if I'm assuming the DataPath FX also has that same type of software, and being able to do all those switches for the multiple machines might be the path to go. But yeah, I've never done that with that device.
Next question.
Nathan Kordyka in Hamilton, Canada says, any experience with reliable cloud distros for pushing a produced live stream to TikTok or Instagram? Alex once mentioned a phone-to-phone box he built to stay within the Insta guidelines. Any guidance appreciated?
Alex, do you remember what that could have?
Yeah. I mean, there's Yellow Duck is the one that a lot of people use to extract the Instagram solution. The TikTok, I don't know what the back end is for TikTok. I don't think there is one. And so Instagram has Yellow Duck, and there's the YOLO box. I think actually goes to Instagram, which I've been told is actually pretty stable for that procedure. So I've talked to some folks with YOLO boxes, and they have been successful at sending that out. The way that we've done it as a general purpose solution has been to, it sounds crazy, but I know, but it works, which is that we build a tent where we basically line up a cell phone to a monitor, and we shoot the monitor. But we build a tent around it, and it takes a lot of tweaking to get everything just right for the cell phone. You still end up, but you don't have any highlights, and it looks like you're shooting from that camera. And the main thing is it gets past, it looks like a cell phone. We used to do that because Facebook would give you a lot more reach before the spring of 2017. Facebook would give you a lot more reach if you were using a cell phone rather than streaming to Facebook. And so what we would do is do that, and then we'd have a whole production pipe on the other end and send it, we'd be doing something somewhere in the world. We'd send it back to our facility in DC and shoot a monitor. And so it was just an easy way for us to manage that. It takes about half a day to get it working just right, and then you never want to take it down because it took a half a day to put it up. But to get it, because you have to get it lined up perfectly, and you have to, it takes some time to get that all working. But that's the way we've done it in the past. But again, YOLO Box will do it into Instagram, I believe. It acts, and the main thing is you just need something that acts like a phone, and then pushes it in. It'll be interesting to see whether the new version of the iPad with a webcam or with a something that looks like a webcam will look like a camera to Instagram. We're not sure if it'll do that or not.
And Jeffrey, I saw you holding something up there.
Yep, this is the InStream from YOLO Box YOLO Live. And let me switch over to this camera right here. So with this, it's still a little bit overwashed, but you have this little area right here that you can expand out, and then it comes with Instagram, TikTok. You can do a Zoom, you can do Facebook, and CapCut. Those are the 5 that you have for options. And Yeah, so that basically, I've been playing with this with a couple cameras. I also have the new PTZ Optics Studio Pro camera, which also does vertical video. So I've been putting that into here, and then a couple PTZ cameras, trying to figure out how you do that so you could actually use your regular cameras. And I'm also going to be doing the iPhone next to come into here to do that. So you have two HDMIs and one USB option, and you can also record and stream. There is nothing that'll take you to multiple services if you're looking for that. So keep that in mind. Other than that, it's been doing the job that it's intended to do, and I'm hoping to get my live on Instagram soon so I can test that out.
Awesome. What a great first hour. Thank you so much, producers, for submitting your questions. Keep them coming as we make this transition to AI and productivity, and where we'll discuss some of the tools that we are using, how we're actually integrating them into the workflow. I know I'm excited to hear from the panel and hear your questions as I'll add to it as well. There's almost like a tool that comes out every day. Like you could just take up all your time just researching the different tools, from capabilities in like Notion, Zapier, and all the other startups that are out there. And one of the main reasons that people are looking in and diving into this AI and productivity space is just the cost savings of like your time. There's a research report that I read where across like three case studies, and this was just using ChatGPT, so not even integrating with too many other apps, but they saw a 66% increase. And I'll drop the link to the article for it to be sent over to you to read. But just even 66%, can you just imagine over the time of a week or your day, just being able to shave minutes, hours, and what that can do for your productivity? In-house, some of the things some of the tools that we use, and there's a lot of them are still very much basic, because as a production company and agency, that we are using ChatGPT being one of the main ones, but even looking at Zoom and using the transcription services there, what that will help us to do from a productivity standpoint is we have certain keywords that we'll use during the course of a meeting. And then so therefore that gets handed off to someone else on the team, that they are just pulling the transcript and then being able to pull those keywords to know exactly where those action items are in the meeting notes. So imagine that might seem really simple, really basic, but what that does is enables you're not necessarily going through, you've got the chapter markers that are helping you to be able to just extract the critical information that you need, because it takes a little bit of thought in that to come up with what will work well as a workflow for you, for your team, but then being able to quickly pull those items out and then transfer them to a project management tool. Looking forward to see if Zoom might have something that could integrate with a project management tool so that could go directly there. But that's definitely one of the ways that I could see that helping event planners, event organizers as well there. And just pulling in some thoughts from the panel. Alexander, how are you using AI tools in your productivity?
Yeah, I'm just waiting for AI to eventually take over those Scrum meetings in the morning. I have largely ignored AI for quite a while until the last couple of months. I've been talking to a lot of people that are not necessarily steeped in this kind of stuff. They don't really live on the bleeding edge of technology, but it's really interesting. It started with ChatGPT. I know somebody that has started using it to write press releases, and it actually is doing a decent job, better than, they're not an expert in writing press releases. So it's really made a difference for them in their small business. How I have been using it is ever since I heard of Opus for creating social media content, it has been a complete life changer. I love creating content, but the soul-sucking aspect of creating these 60 to 90-second clips takes up so much of my time. I'm working 7 days a week. I have a full-time job with a side hustle of producing podcasts for people. So I have no personal time for anything, and it's actually, it's been starting to get to me a little bit. So Opus has been amazing, and they're constantly adding features, and it has been saving me anywhere from 6 to 8 hours of work, if not more, on doing this stuff. And it's doing a really good job. It does make mistakes, and there's a few things I wanted to do, but it has made a drastic improvement in my life. And it's not as good as a human editor, but it is improving at such an incredible pace that you can barely keep up with this stuff. The one thing that concerns me is that there's so many players right now. I don't know what the longevity of this is, and I think we're going to see a lot of companies kind of just go away. That's the one thing that has kept me from, now I'm paying for Opus, but I'm not really willing to give them money for an entire year of service, because I don't know if they're going to be around a year from now. I mean, the CEO is saying that they're still not profitable at this point. So that's the one thing that gives me pause, but I think it's making a huge impact in my life, and I'm sure it is for others. So it's really interesting.
Jeffrey?
Yeah, the first time that I actually used AI for in a more productive environment was I was at these blogger events, and people were just talking, and just like you're trying to keep up with everything. So I pulled out Otter.ai, just came off. This brand new and in beta mode, and I set that right in front, and it started transcribing everything that was being said, and I was able to pull those off and turn around, actually go from the phone, which was what was recording, to the desktop, which you could actually see it within like a 5 to 10 minute period. So I can then pull out quotes and then throw it into Twitter and or X or whatever it's called now, and be able to get that out as real time as possible. So I've been doing that. Of course, I also have a website, and I do a lot of blogging. So putting in the productive, not only just the fact of creating the blogs, which I try not to do as much, because I just started a brand new show last week, and the one thing I wanted to do is not make it script my shows for me. I want to script my own shows, but I can have it give me ideas. Like, for instance, there's a lot of tech websites out there, and half of them now have way too many pop-ups. Or you go to a tech website, and then next thing you know, that you have to pay for just to read the articles. So, but a lot of times I can go to some of these AI areas and check out some of the news that's happening without getting completely inundated with pop-ups. Another thing I've been working on, and this is kind of visual, I'm going to show this really quick, and that's the way that I'm basically showing my studio. So if you take a look at this is me in my studio, and this is completely AI generated from the area of 1080p area all the way to 4K. Now, so I use Photoshop. You just saw the change right there. So all those edges were done through Photoshop, through generative AI. We got a big group that's playing with this idea, and because the idea is spawning a possible new business out of things, where I can take a snapshot of this, and then do generative AI in Photoshop, and then create different scenes, different frames for them to come in and have larger. They can start at 360, and then we can have it pull up to 1080. It's definitely changing the way the green screen works in production, and I have a feeling that there's a lot of green screen will never go away, at least at this point. But with the fact of generative AI, and the fact of how TikTok takes out the and puts in virtual backgrounds and things like that, I think we'll see a big difference in how people use that.
Alex?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I'm really thinking about a lot is trying to keep AI away from necessarily the creative process, but having it handle. I think that's going to. I think that the real risk, we talked about this a little bit on Sunday, is I think that there is a real risk of what I would call the junkification of the social networks that could destroy them. Like, this is something that AI, I think, could, us being able to effortlessly dump huge amounts of content into the networks could really cause more problems than I think we realize. But I will say that I think that there's a lot of things like we're really thinking about hard in office hours about creating kind of a service for our members, which is that, what if we can take all those first hour questions and dice them up and then start building separate playlists. So let's say I might want a playlist where it's all audio or all video or all whatever, and I can just listen to that. That is a very labor intensive thing for us to do by hand. But you'll see that we're kind of pushing at the hosts specifically here to say next question very clearly. And the reason we're doing that is so that eventually AI will be able to grab onto those sections and just cut from the beginning of next question to the next question out, and just automatically produce a huge amount of content for us that isn't really more content, and we're not trying to make it viral. We're really just trying to make sure that if you really wanted to just listen to something, you could. But those are the kind of things that you can do because you can set up a set of rules and just have it do it, as opposed to having somebody go in. It wouldn't take that long, but it would still be an hour of someone's day every day to do that, which wouldn't necessarily make sense. So I think that there is those kinds of things of being able to go out and grab that, being able to potentially summarize the entire show, I think is really, really interesting. But I do think that also we're looking heavily from a productivity perspective at languaging and being able to, not only build summaries, but build multiple languages of everything. So I think that, making it more accessible, making it easier to make it more pliable for a lot of people that may want to look at it in a different way. Those are all things that we're really thinking pretty hard at. As far as what I use it for today, ChatGPT is the thing that I probably use the most as far as a productivity. ChatGPT and Midjourney mostly for ideas. Like I needed to build, I'm working on a design for a concert stage. So I want it to look a certain, I have to have what do I want it to look like behind, a lot of different players. And so I just started putting terms into Midjourney, and I produced hundreds of concepts. Now we can sit down, and I grabbed about 20 or 30 of them. Now I'm going to have a meeting this week with some folks and go, well, here's some ideas, and they're not just me trying to find Google existing ones, because usually with most existing ones, I look at them and I go, well, that's good, but I wouldn't do this, this, and this. Almost any concert venue that I look at, I'm like, there's like 6 things that I probably wouldn't want to do. So I don't want to make those examples. Whereas in Midjourney, I can sit there and have it look really close to what I want, because I can throw away hundreds and hundreds of photos. There's really only about 20 or 30 photos that are worth having on the internet, with small concert spaces that are high quality. So I think that there's that's what I'm kind of, that's where thinking through that is really interesting. The other thing with ChatGPT is I have it explain things to me all the time. Someone says something, I say, tell me about this. And what's interesting, the thing that's really important is saying it's setting a reference point in ChatGPT is the secret sauce. You are this and I am this. Like, now explain this to me. So you are Richard Feynman, I'm a 5th grader. Explain, string theory. Like, explain this. Or you are this, and I am a student. Or I'm one of your peers. And it will change the whole process of what it does inside of that. And I find that to be very, very powerful. Is to be able to, and it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the only place I look. I can still Google things, but I'll be honest with you that ChatGPT is about as accurate as the internet. like when I search things and I look at what, Yahoos are saying about any technical thing, they're not that much more accurate than ChatGPT. But if I look at ChatGPT, sometimes I can build a contextual understanding of something and then start cross-checking its notes, which is what I would do with anybody's website.
I think you touched on something there, Alex, with explaining what you're trying to do or what's happening with office hours to like pull the questions to create playlists. Like, if you can talk through this for a second of just your process of what do you look at that this is like, okay, we're going to see if there's an AI solve for this, and what that thinking part, because that's the thing with all of these apps, you can, I said that earlier, like you can spend so much time with these tools that are out there, but trying to find the right tool to help you with your solution.
And we don't know what the tool is yet. We're still looking at, I mean, Opus
Right.
is, I'm trying to figure out how to do it in Opus. Like, so that's the, so I haven't quite figured that out yet. But the, but the
But
idea
just
though
the
is,
process, yeah.
and I'm also looking at potentially doing it with even Resolve, like just putting into Resolve and having an ID those things, but there's not quite enough scripting, we'd have to build a plugin to do that, so I'd rather have it just process the video. There's other issues, like for instance, one of the things that we are interested in doing is taking little snippets out of the Michael Krasny's, Gray Matter show, and being able. But the problem that we have is that we do a super source with Michael and the guest. So what I want to do is record the ISOs of both of those and then rebuild that, with that, so it doesn't have that doesn't have those cuts in it. Same thing with this show here. So when some people have been playing with using, we have. One of our members is playing with building shorts, but the problem really is that we're still cutting out of a super source, which doesn't look great. And so so what we want to do is, what I'm realizing is we need to have like active speaker and something else, like a couple of different things that we're grabbing onto. So then I need to throw that into some version of take these and edit them together automatically. And again, I look at things that are difficult because they're tedious. Like, tedious is what I'm trying to get rid of, not creativity. I'm trying to open up more space for creativity by getting rid of all the tedious stuff. Like, one thing that we're thinking about right now is that there's a problem with Zoom. So if you do a podcast over Zoom, that we run into is that you have, I'm speaking, if I'm recording Zoom ISO on one side, it means that the host, who's local, if the host is local, will immediately butt up against the person who's finishing saying what they're saying. But because we're going to a server and back for both of them, there's a little gap of about 300 to 500 milliseconds between when the host finishes asking a question and when the person starts to talk. And that little gap, it's fine. It's not a horror. People get kind of used to it. But when you take out that little gap, it feels like they're in the same room. It creates more immediacy. And so a lot of times we go in and pull those little gaps out, but you can't right now. We're playing with Descript to do that. Descript hasn't been great at it. It's a little ham-fisted in the way that it cross fades between the two things. And so we're trying to figure, it doesn't do that as cleanly as we'd like. Because what we needed to do is be a little smarter. Like, don't look for gaps, because sometimes someone just stops and thinks. I need you to look at when you're going from one person to the other, and then remove that gap, but leave but let me leave a little bit in there for a breath. Like, there's a bunch of things that it has to make decisions on. We haven't gotten that down we're still doing it by hand. But I think that that's where those kinds of edits are the kinds of things that I think we can get to a point where a lot of that can be done automatically, where we just push it into a system and a lot of it gets, processed and it feels better and we're not doing a lot of extra work. But I think that on the creative side, I think that, and I think that there's also how authentic do we want it to sound? Like, I feel like taking those gaps out is really just reproducing the room. It's not really cutting out. We're not trying to cut out a lot of everything what people said, or suck all the air out of a conversation, or other things like that. And one thing we're noticing in the market, you always have to pay attention to what kids are doing, where kids are going, because they're kind of driving. They're always ahead of us. They're always like thinking about something ahead of us. Like, when I remember my kids were starting to text, my older kids were starting to text, and I was like, I don't understand this text thing. It's like, now I am like, why are you sending me an email? like when you could have just texted me. like I don't understand. Like, I check my email like 4 times a day, and I have my text open all the time. So in the same way, what we find are kids are leaning less and leaning away from really highly finished work and leaning more and more towards kind of an authentic life experience. Snapchat is really, where, we're going to have some folks on talking about Snapchat in the future, but it's really exploding for under 18. But it's really life experience, stuff where people are just they want it to be raw. So I'm not sure, where that all fits into it. I think that might be a reaction to AI, a reaction to overproduced, content. So we always have to kind of keep track of that as well.
And Alexander.
I want to go back to something Alex said a little bit ago about the junkification of social media. I'd make the argument that happened years ago before AI was
Agreed.
even around. I think what you're describing is a people problem because there's always going to be junk content out there.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of junk content out there. But what I'm saying is that, wow, can we magnify it? Now we can just spew, like it's taking bad decisions and then amplifying them. They say that, to err is human, but to really screw things up requires a computer. And it's because it can do so many operations it can just simply amplify everything. So I think that the real challenge that we're going to have with social media is this idea that I can dice everything up and suddenly all these shorts, and, rather than, there's something really great in the sense of like in TikTok, like for instance, I think TikTok lost a lot when it became overproduced. I think it's nice to see it, but there was something very raw that every once in a while you see on TikTok now, but it isn't nearly as fun as it used to be because it's not as handcrafted now.
And I think, Alexander, to your point for Alex, of that, what the AI tool, and I'm looking at John actually says everybody can become a spammer with AI, which is very true. But for those who use the tools well and taking out the tedious, the cutting, the spaces, the transcription, those things, and then being able to actually spend the time being creative so that you can give more thought to how you're going to shoot, create, or put something out into the world. I think that's where that's what we're going to see coming up, is like those people who are able to be more creative. Alex?
And I want to say I was having lunch a couple of weeks ago with a visual effects supervisor who used my first product. The very first product I put out was called the Surface Toolkit. The Surface Toolkit was basically, I don't know what you would call AI, but I built a series of actions inside of Photoshop. I took a bunch of pictures and I just shoved them into Photoshop and produced 4,000 images, and of those pulled 80 that I liked and put them on a disc and sold them, and made, I don't know, $250,000 over a summer. And but that helped launch my company. But it was it was literally just doing auto processing because there was no way I'd ever have time to get what I was trying to get to by hand. Took the photos by hand, and I had an idea, but what I did is I worked on the algorithm of how it was going to do the imagery, and then I just hit go. And every morning I would come back in and there'd be all these images, and I go, oh, that didn't really work. So I'd play with it a little bit more and I hit go again the next night. And so I finally came up with a mix, kind of a magic mix to grab that stuff out. And so, I've been doing some version of this for a long time, and it wasn't impossible to do it any other way. So I think that there's ways for us to extract value out of things with these algorithms. But I think that there's also just an incredible opportunity to just magnify what's already been problematic in social media.
Jeffrey?
Yeah, I totally agree on that. That's great. Two more things I want to talk about. One was YouTube and how AI has been changing in YouTube and creating of the events, creating of the videos itself. I use a program called TubeBuddy, and there's another program called vidIQ, and they're both working heavily on bringing AI into those productivity tools. So because if you've ever posted something to YouTube, they ask a lot of questions. They tell you to fill out this, fill out this. Do you want to do monetizations on this? Do you have any copyright on here? This and that and the other thing. And to make posting any type of video a lot easier, I personally do a lot of back-end stuff. So I just put in a couple words and then it creates content. This is pre-AI. And now with AI, I can do a whole bunch of things like figure out the SEO on that. What are the best keywords on that? Heat maps on the thumbnails. So I can put the thumbnail into the program, and it's basically telling me, okay, this is where people are going to click the most, and this is what you might want to work on, and go from there. So that's a great thing for YouTube. And I don't know if you noticed this, but I'm wearing my own creation. I have done some t-shirts in the past, and this is what's called Geeky AI. Started out with Midjourney, and then of course with Midjourney, if you want to claim copyright on it, you got to make some adjustments to it, at least 25%. So that's what I did with this guy right here. And it's just, yeah, I'm going to be working with a lot more on the business end, not only with my logo, but also with fun little t-shirts and things like that, so I can put them out on my channel.
Nice. Alexander?
Yeah, so one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot lately as I start to use some of these tools is the larger, more distressing philosophical conversation about losing work to AI, and what does this mean as far as the value that I provide to clients for the type of work that I do. I mean, prime example of this is using Opus to remove the amount of work that I have to do every single week to create social media content. So it's really made me think about diversifying and figuring out and having a conversation, an honest, open, transparent conversation with my client that, you know, what other value can I provide? Can I help you with booking guests for the podcast? Can I maybe do things in other areas? I mean, ultimately, he needs to use me because he doesn't know how to use the gear. He hasn't made the same investment in the studio that I have, but it has worried me a little bit about what is this going to do to editors that have to edit this kind of content every week. And we already see this stuff with Descript. I mean, we've got tools now that can actually create a multi-cam edit in a matter of minutes, whereas for a human being, it may take you hours and hours and hours to cut that show properly. So I'm curious what other people on the panel think about that.
Nothing. I think part of like the conversation we had last week, just productivity and the different tools or whatever our workflows are to free up like the human aspect of it. So the human intelligence can't be replaced. Like, so in the use case that you've provided with your client, one, it's definitely going to be relationship building and making sure that trust factor of things and finding ways that, well, how can you help them to grow? Because the tools that you're talking about is like the content aspect, but the strategy behind growth, the execution behind growth, like those are those elements that's going to take thought and experience in that. So I'm just brain dumping as you shared those aspects. So like even for us company wise, we're looking at those ways with our clients of, well, these tools are here, saving them time from either learning them or training them. Being steps ahead is always going to put you in a position of need and value. So instead of looking at, okay, what's going to replace me next, as much as, okay, how can I continue to add value to this client and that trust? Because Alex shares this all the time. Many of us on the panel have shared that clients, they either stay with us or they find us because of referral, and those referrals come from trust. So that's just some of the ways that that I think about it. And Alex?
Yeah. So number one is I've probably had 6 or 7 different careers, since I was 20, or, and I just keep moving through them. Like I'm always leaving one for the next, like and evolving, and I can see where I'm trying to get to in the future. A lot of times I think that we used to always say with visual effect shots is that you never finish a visual effect shot. You just run out of time. And this is as good as it's ever going to get. In the same sense, you always want to look at, no matter how good technology gets within computer graphics, if you're looking at something like a Pixar film, generally it averages out to 45 minutes a frame. And it has been that way. So just so you know, in the industry, it's been 45 minutes a frame for like 25 years. It has not changed. The quality of what we can do in each one of those frames keeps on getting better, but we keep on, and you think that you're going to get rid of folks like that. And there are things that there are many tedious things that, like, so for instance, match moving used to be an entire building at ILM. I always point it out when someone's visiting, because our office is in where all the old Industrial Light and Magic was. And I always point over and go, that used to be match moving. People used to have to take a box and they'd put it in the scene and they'd have to figure out the focal length. And then they would sit there and painstakingly animate a camera. And then over time, we figured out how to automate that. And the best of those folks ended up just learning the new software and then doing it. The folks that weren't as good at it either went on to do something else, but and again, what they did is they just did their job better because they had tools that were better that allowed them to do it. Same thing with rotoscoping. Rotoscoping was something that was done. And we're going to try to get a friend of mine on that started off in the model shop really as an assistant at ILM, and now is doing Unreal Engine. He's doing, and he has not. He just keeps on evolving with whatever new tools are available to him. He keeps figuring it out. I think he's in his 70s now, and he's just cooking along. Just something new. To work in, and so we want to look at that as a. We want to look at that as a lesson, right? As that we want to keep evolving with those tools. I think that I don't know what your podcasts are like. I know the podcasts that I work on, we could always make it better. And if we had tools that will improve the quality and tighten the process, make it more visual, make it available for both audio and video. Like for instance, we stream the gray matter. We streamed gray matter as a if you go to graymatter.show, you'll see this show that we do, but it's only on audio. If you watch the stream, you'll see the stream. So if you watch it on YouTube, if you're there for the live event, that's us evolving that video version of it that we're going to eventually release. But we're sitting there playing with it, and man, would I love to have more automated tools to make that work. And so I don't look at that replacing it. I only look at it as giving me the tools that I need so that I can keep on creatively going down the path. And everything that's tedious that you're doing right now is something that's holding you back from being more creative. And so how do we get rid of the tedium so that we can continue to just say, this is what I want that's in front of me? And I think that's the real power of being able to express our ideas. So I think for your client, I think that one of the things we're doing with Gray Matter is this idea of a live show where people can take live questions and then apply them. I think that's a really powerful format. I don't think a lot of people are doing it, and I think that we're doing it, and I think it's going to be something that's going to be a big deal because we have to figure out. I think once a lot of people start doing this idea that I'm going to broadcast live for my recording, and then I'm going to cut it into a podcast. When people get used to that, the power of that is you get so many more people that are asking questions online. It actually enriches, like this show. This show is the beginning of that. What would the six of us, we're talking about it now. We're all having a discussion, but we're going to open it up to questions here in a second. And there's going to be 10 questions that are going to fill in the rest of the hour. In the first hour, what would we have talked about if we didn't have producers asking questions? But the tools, we had to have all these tools in the back end, the software to make it work. And the software that we have, Makana, to make that work is the only way we could get it done. We couldn't just sit there and just text us your questions. Like, how would we do that? So AI gives us, I think, all these tools allow us to just do our job better.
And Bill.
Well, I'm going to do it really quickly, but there is going to be a lot of disruption. You just can't get away from that. And, office hours, I think our audience is a self-selected group of people who are very curious, usually very technically savvy. And I think there will always be a way for people who have those kind of skill sets to find a way, no matter what technology changes, no matter what comes in, you figure out a way to analyze, to notice the problem, analyze it, come up with solutions for it, and implement those solutions. And there have been people throughout ages who, with whatever the technology is of the time, have been able to do that. I'm a little more concerned about the disruption on the bottom end of society for people who do not have those kind of analytical skills, don't lean toward that. There used to be a lot of work for a lot of people who didn't want to take that path. They really just wanted their job, 8 to 5, doing whatever they did, and then to go home and pursue their passions after that and have those two separate lives. And they weren't kind of engaged 24/7. And I do think that's going to cause more social problems as these bots and artificial intelligences push more and more people to being more and more productive. There are going to be fewer and fewer people needed for the first category, and probably a lot more people needed for the second. It's way beyond my understanding, and the social scientists are going to have to figure that out, and I hope they do.
If you think that, we often say that if you think that your job is boring and brain dead, don't worry, you won't have to do it for much longer.
Exactly. And that's very difficult for a big swath of humanity.
All right. We've had a fiery intro conversation around AI and productivity, let's get into our producer questions.
Absolutely.
Bill?
Dave Trotman in Edmonton, Canada starts us off here. We talk a lot about using AI tools for brainstorming an idea. Would this also be useful for seeking inspiration? It seems like a good playground for notions and ideas.
Alex?
That's exactly what I use Midjourney for. And even ChatGPT. More than anything else that I use AI for, it's just to brainstorm. It's just to think about a bunch of things that are unlike something else that I've thought about. It comes up with solutions that not only would I not think of, is that nobody would think of, and you can produce hundreds of them. And then I look at them and I pull the stuff out. A lot of times I'm still hiring a concept person or somebody else to draw it out, because I'll say, I like these 4 things. Now go draw something out for me. But I'm able to dive through something and produce something that would have taken years to do by hand.
Jeffrey?
So with when I spoke at Infocom, I had to create a PowerPoint, and I wanted to create a story around the PowerPoint. So what I did was I went to Bard and ChatGPT to try and kind of figure out a good story to tell around creating videos, creating a home studio, so you could do videos, and I had this great story that needed photos. It was about a person who wanted to start a basket weaving podcast, and so I needed a person to do that. So I went to Midjourney to try and find a good image to use. I also went to Photoshop and the generative AI to do that as well. And the bigger thing is, and this is what I'm really hoping that Adobe's going to start striving for, is commonalities. So I could create a person, and I could create a person with multiple expressions, with a happy person, a sad face, and more. Because if you highlight and fill, it's just going to fill with somebody else's face. And sometimes the noses are off, and sometimes the smiles are off. But I did a lot of work, and this really is a trial and error type thing. You've got to go through a lot of examples before you find the one that's going to work best for you in this case. And I'm hoping that's going to get a lot better in the years to come. But ultimately, I found one where I could actually bring a person to life, give them a couple expressions, couple movements, and did a little bit of extra photoshopping to make it happen, but it worked for me. So things like that for creating those presentations is just one of those. It's going to be a game changer, especially when things get better.
Yeah, Dave, I totally agree with I just finished doing a campaign with ChatGPT where it's like, hey, can ChatGPT be a social media manager? And that started off with just putting all the data from the social platform, putting all the data of past posts in there, and then saying, okay, here's the end goal that we're trying to achieve, and then having ChatGPT help come up with concepts. And part of that was like, okay, hey, it's X day, or these events are coming up. What do you think about this? And just like throwing some ideas and concepts at ChatGPT, and then its ability to look at some of the past content that has been shared, how those things performed, how those pieces of content performed, and then being able to come up with an idea and then that's okay, but what about this? And just going back. So it's almost like having a writing partner or having someone to bounce some ideas off of. And again, it's got all that data, so it's also making some inferences on what could and couldn't work. So yeah, we do that all the time, and now even more so after doing that for 30 days. Yeah, just it's definitely something that's helpful in that. And not only from the social media and that content perspective, but even from a business side of things and business ideas and use cases. Like if we're looking at changing this service, what do you think would happen if XYZ, and putting out those scenarios and getting some of those concepts and those ideas back? So highly, like that's one of the main ways that we use ChatGPT. John?
Trying to differentiate what Dave's asking here on brainstorming versus inspiration. I don't know if he's looking for a Tony Robbins AI to yell at him and walk across the coals and do better in life.
I'm pretty sure that could happen. Throw in some like DID there, and then you could probably get that to happen. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Elvis and Spiro in Berlin. Does the new bloom of AI bring us any closer to a world where more tasks and or jobs can be automated to the point where more governments can start considering implementing universal income?
Alex?
Yeah, probably not. I think that the issue is that income without use is a really complicated process. I think that the problem is that it would create inflation. Like, like that's the real issue is that you'd end up with inflation. And we haven't figured out how to solve that. You saw what we did when we dumped a bunch of money in the United States. We suddenly got a lot of inflation, and that impacts, people's savings and, the cost of everything, the cost of life. Inflation is a tax that lasts forever. So when something goes up, it's like, we just, and so it's a really a problem of dumping money into a market is it causes some unexpected consequences. Now, saying that, I do think that, as Bill talked about, we have to think about a large set of the population that didn't set themselves up for success in this environment. And I think, I really think that there's a lot of people that just don't necessarily want to try to keep up with, with everything that's going on here. And we should think about where we can provide opportunities for them to, I think there's some people that would really like to just go work casually on a farm, and not have to, and build something that's a little bit more, it's a little slower, using some of the technology to make it really efficient. But they had a hard time in one of the countries I worked in Africa because the average farmer works about 15 hours a week. It's really hard to get them to work more. Like they've been doing this their whole life, and it's hard in the spring, or it's hard in this country. They had 3 planting cycles every year because there's no cold, and so, but they, it's hard for a little while and then hard at the end. In the middle, they mostly hang out with their friends. And so, and make sure that nothing happens. And it was really hard to get them to do more. And we have to question, we've decided that 40 hours a week is the number, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's 15 hours a week. Maybe it's 20 hours a week. Maybe it's, that type of thing. So I think that, I think we want to look at, whether we really worry about that. But I do think that's going to be hard. I think it's hard to give people money, like to make that happen. I mean, I think that there are places where we could say that you put some in or something, but we've got a lot of, our most of the Western economies are about to become very top heavy, and so for them to add more resources, I'm just not sure where the money would come from, because this would work great if they were having more kids, but they're not. And so, or if they had a massive increase of immigration, which they're not. But without those things, the United States is reaching point of no return. Most of Europe's already reached point of no return. Most big chunks of Asia have already reached point of no return. Point of no return is 1.6 replacement rate. Once you see that below that, you're on the spiral. Until you start increasing immigration, you have no chance of recovery. So I think that the problem is they're going to have less and less money over the next couple decades to spend on the number of people that they already have. So that's going to be problematic.
Bill?
It's a difficult circumstance. I know Scandinavian countries, I can't remember whether it was Norway or Denmark, did a pretty long-scale test of guaranteed universal income for a while. And they stopped doing it after some years. I think they got the data that they needed. In terms of sustainable income, that's probably one thing. I do think that as so many people get displaced, some nations, areas are going to have to make the decision. If it gets so tough that people can't sustain themselves and they're literally, I hate to use the word, but literally starving because they just can't find any employment, then some sort of safety net at the bottom may become necessary for a period of time until people figure this out. That doesn't mean life will be easy or good for those people, but at least it won't cause the massive mess that would cause, although cultures have gone through that somehow. It's cruel and it's difficult, but these are tough problems, and they're not going away anytime soon. We're going to have to, countries, governments, the whole world's going to have to deal with them.
And Jeffrey.
Yeah, the only way that I could see this happening is if we start using AI to determine stocks, determine financial directions. other than just the, hey, write me a blog post or write me 10 titles on this or that. There are countries, of course, that are banning AI, and they're the usual suspects, although you've seen that one of them is, even though that's banned, they're still using it, and they're finding ways around that type of architecture. So even if there was regulation, there would definitely be a whole bunch of people trying to get around that system, and I think it's just going to be way too hard to do any type of regulation like that.
Next question.
John Snyder in Reno, Nevada says ChatGPT is rolling out several important features currently in beta: code interpreter, custom instructions, and plugins. How have you used these features to become more productive?
Go ahead, John.
So code interpreter is a playground. It's like Swift Playground, but it's for Python. So it's okay for developers to go in there and kick the tires, etc. Custom instructions now, Alex might find this useful. His setup where he says, act like you're fireman reporting to a fifth grader, you could save that as a custom instruction, so you don't have to type it in every time. That's custom instructions. And plugins, right now there's over 600, and most of them are clean show.
I have been using plugins. I find them super helpful. Some of my faves is like Prompt Perfect. So I will put in a prompt, and then it then takes that and it's like, okay, here's an even better way for you to say or synthesize that prompt. Also show me diagrams. So when there's a certain type of project that we're working on and just needing that visual representation to determine the workflow, using it from that perspective. I've got a lot of friends who use the travel ones to help them plan travel. So the plugins were definitely a great addition to ChatGPT. Next question.
Morgan Price in Victoria, British Columbia is up next. Any AI Foley apps out there, or AI text to ambient sounds apps? Are there text to speech and text to image, or there are text to speech and text to images? Why not text to other sounds?
John?
So anytime you're looking for a new application, just go to futuretools.io and search in there. I found an image to sound effect, and then it also lets you put a description in. It's open source and it's not great, but you'll find this feature ended up being integrated into one of the big ones. So remember the turn of the century, there was over 1,000 auto manufacturers, and how many of those are left today? That's exactly what's going to happen in the AI industry. So the majority of these applications, just exactly like Alexander said, will all go away.
And Morgan, I will have to, because I'm streaming today through my iPhone, so I couldn't pull up the app. There's one I found a couple weeks ago. I think it's like Movio or Mode. It's an M1, an AI tool where you can put in your prompts and it makes music. So I thought that was phenomenal, and I started to test it out a bit because that is tremendously helpful for creating some background music for some shorts or different content, so that like you can exactly set the mood that you want. So I will, once the show's done, put it in Discord for you. And Jeffrey?
Yeah, I've played with actually a few of those apps, not only desktop but also on phone, and they're not really. I don't think they're quite there yet. Definitely a little bit of jitteriness, and then you also have to worry about if your AI making any type of music that you have to check it, or else if it's very, very close to another song, you can get a copyright strike on it. So that's just something to keep in mind if you're creating anything AI for music. Sound effects might be a different story, but definitely for music.
Next question.
Tlaloc Lopez Waterman, Brevard, North Carolina. What dangers are there in having AI help with generating code?
John?
The danger is productivity loss. And so the code that it writes today is mediocre at best. And so most programmers spend 25% of their time coding and 75% debugging. And so they want tools on AI to help them debug and not write the code so much. But I'll tell you, 100% of all programmers in the next 5 years will be using AI tools to develop code.
And Alex?
Yeah, I think that the externalization of ideas and so on and so forth is the problem. And also, I think that the advanced Advanced coders will do much better at this than beginner coders who won't know the difference between what's working and what's not working. So the advanced coder, as far as accelerating what they can already do, and this is the danger that Bill talked about, is that if you're advanced, AI is going to make you much more valuable because you're going to be able to amplify your skill set. And this gets into that. The separation of the haves and the have-nots is not really a people having money, but it's people having knowledge. And so if you've got a lot of knowledge right now, you're able to amplify that and become more valuable. Your hour is worth more because you can do all these extra things, but you're doing it at the cost of the folks that don't have that don't know the difference between good and bad, of what they're doing, is that puts them in a high risk position. And the question is how do you get more advanced people if they don't have years of being unadvanced, or non-advanced? And that's always the problem. I mean, that's why we don't have any machining or real at scale anymore, is because we stopped making stuff. We sent it to China, and then there was nowhere to build a precision machinist, or train one, because that takes 10 years, of someone just doing stuff at a reasonably good size. So I think that's going to be the challenge. I think that it puts more pressure on schools. Now, the good news is AI is going to make it easier to teach a lot of things. The bad news is or any good for schools, you may have to stay in school. Like, this is another thing that we have to think about. We were talking about over the weekend with a friend of mine. School may last until you're 30. Like, there may not be entry level jobs. You may have to get really good at what you do, and by the time you're 30, and you may spend a lot of time in training before that happens, because you just may not be competitive. You can't just get out of school, because right now I think that school is mostly just proving that you went. Like, college is not really that. I mean, you have a degree. It doesn't. Most people who leave college with a bachelor's degree are, in my world, in my production space, almost useless. Like, I would have much rather had them at 18, and had them working on projects with me for 4 years than go to school, because they come out with a bunch of ideas from people who haven't done production in a long time and don't know what they're doing. And so I have to retrain everybody to do that. So school has been kind of like a thing that we thought was necessary, but it's about to become really important. It's going to be the thing that you have to have a safety place where your income is paid for, you're handled, and then you have to stay in it for a long time and prove that you can get it. And you're either gonna get into a job or go work on a farm. There won't be a lot of space in between.
Next question.
Elwerson Sparrow, back from Balloon. Has anyone had problems with the accuracy of ChatGPT? I somewhat distrust it, because if they ask, "Are you sure?" multiple times in a row, it'll keep changing its answers. It seems to lack confidence in itself, which erodes my confidence in it. Point well taken.
John?
This in the industry is called hallucinations, and it will do hallucinations. I have a client that makes a nutraceutical, and we were looking for clinical studies, and both Bard and ChatGPT manufactured clinical studies that were totally fake. And so you have to drill down into your answers, unfortunately, right now.
Jeffrey?
Yeah, whenever I've used it to do a quick review of a product or anything like that, I definitely have to read through it, because sometimes it'll take me in a completely different direction, especially if there's two different products that share the same name. And then it's getting confused as to product A versus product B. And then it's telling you things like the features of product A. And then all of a sudden it jumps over and goes from there. Plus, you have right now ChatGPT. The most dangerous part of ChatGPT is the free tier versus the paid tier, because the free tier is reference only. And a lot of people seem to kind of dismiss that thought, thinking, oh, this is going to be perfect for me. And then they're starting to write a whole bunch of stuff that's not going to get checked with current information, and then next thing you know, some disinformation is going to come out there. And I'm expecting that the reference version of ChatGPT is going to have to go in the next couple of years because of this disinformation.
Next question.
Morgan Price in Victoria, British Columbia. How are people using AI to collaborate on drafting scripts for fiction or nonfiction productions? Anyone try pseudowrite.com for this? It's a fiction writing app.
Alex?
I've not used pseudowrite. I've actually used ChatGPT for this and been surprised. I feel like I could build a whole podcast, not a podcast, but a whole YouTube channel, just asking for a script from ChatGPT and then doing it. Like I'm just going to do the script the way it came in. I had one where I said I wanted two snails falling in. I wanted a romantic comedy action thriller of two snails falling in love in a classroom lab, and it made it. And it was it going to win an Oscar? No. Was it as good as most Saturday morning cartoons? 100%. Like it definitely had moments of rom-com. It had moments, a little romance, and it was very predictable, but it was very much like what you would expect we did have two snails racing through the aquarium or whatever that they were in. Anyway, so I thought this would actually, if I made this video, it'd probably get if I did it well in Unreal, probably get a lot of views. So I think that it can produce, I don't know if I could produce a whole movie worth watching, but I think little shorts, it could be a lot of fun.
Next question.
Alexander Knight in Vancouver, BC. What is the process for getting ChatGPT to create show notes for a podcast? Can I upload an MP3 for this?
John?
Yeah, I don't know about show notes. This is interesting. I would load the MP3 into Mac Whisper, and that would create the whole script for the whole show, and then I would summarize that in ChatGPT. That's how I would do it.
Jeffrey?
Yeah, I was thinking something like Otter. I'm not sure. It does. I'm assuming ChatGPT. This is one of the beta features is to bring in audio. But I would always. What I've done is things like Otter or bringing it into something like Premiere Pro that does transcribing options, and then bringing it into something like ChatGPT to do summary to get better answers from there.
Likewise, what has been said, or even something like the script. So just basically you need the transcription, and then yes, get ChatGPT and Baird, et cetera, to create your show notes. Next question.
Craig McFarland, Boston, Mass. How are you avoiding eating up AI productivity games with tool and or plugin review and management?
John?
So this is the nice thing about GitHub. GitHub, you have an ability to provide feedback via stars on open source projects. And then once we see a preponderance of stars on a particular open set, we know that it's good. It's a good release of product.
Next question.
Morgan Price, Victoria, British Columbia. Can AI apps give us realistic and variable voices? Can AI voices whisper up close or yell from a distance?
Alex?
I don't think it can yet, but I think that we should be assuming that this is coming, where you're going to have a voiceover tool. I think that what's probably coming is a voiceover tool where you can just start rolling through voices, building voices out for these things, and then being able to direct those voices by just saying, this is whispering, this is yelling, this is speaking, this is sad, this is whatever. And you could put all those things into it and allow it to reproduce those things. I think we're probably 2 or 3 years away from that. And I think it will, for not the top tier, but the tier below that, like 1 or 2 tiers below the average fictional novel that gets put out on Audible. You're going to see these things, and it's not going to be one person impersonating 6 people. It will be 6 different voices with a narrator, and there'll be a lot of bits and pieces to it. And again, it'll be at a level that that those books couldn't afford because they just don't have the runs. Because it's one thing to hire somebody for $5,000 to do a voiceover, do an Audible book. It's another thing to hire 25 actors or 30 actors to do something like the BBC does for some of these things. That's a really much more expensive process that doesn't happen for smaller books. And I think you're going to see it happening for smaller books within the next 5 years.
And Bill?
It'll come, but it's going to be interesting. There will need to be a markup language for variability if it's ever going to be anything other than machine. I mean, after they've done 100 mystery novel automated voiceovers for ACX or Audible, you're going to have the problem where all of those sentences start sounding exactly the same, particularly if they use non-variabled AI voices. So somebody's going to have to go in there and say, a reader would do this one up, they'd end that sentence down. You can set some Boolean rules and things like that. If this sentence structure, then close the period. If not, lead over that line into the next. The things that human voices do naturally that gives you that authenticity and variability, there will be some of that, but I would expect that the markup of the script would take almost as long as doing the voiceover. So I'm not sure at that point whether it's more efficient to have a human being who's really good at the job do the job. I don't know. We'll see.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, a Cleveland-based company, is using GPT-3 to generate commentary and playlists. Could you see AI displacing radio workers?
Alex?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so many things that can be done. Again, I think that there are. I think commentary is a little harder, but play by play is something that, for again, smaller things could eventually be be incorporated. But the big thing is all the stuff that is the station IDs, the stock updates, what happened today, and whatever. There's many things that right now we have humans reading that are really, again, these are the tedious things that you put in audio, and I think those kinds of things you're going to see. Again, humans will be doing creative things. The machines will be doing everything else, and there just won't be a lot of jobs to just do rote work. I think that's what we have to really look at. If you're doing rote work right now, you need to figure out how to move forward quickly.
And Jeffrey?
I think that it's definitely going to do it, but radio is already being displaced unless you're doing a talk show. The tape recorder display changed the way that some radio DJs work, because then they could work at like 2:00 in the morning, create a couple things, and then put together a show, and then have that run on air. For a lot of these small tasks, I would guess, these were all intern type tasks. So, and interns are still needed. So, so they get credit for their college. So I would guess that a lot of this stuff, although they might use AI, will most likely be still there.
Well, that's a wrap on another great AI conversation. Thank you so much to our producers for all of your questions. And the chat there's so much discussion happening in the chat, and to our panelists for your insight stories, and of course, sharing the tools that you're using, and our back-end production team, for without which this would not be possible. Just a reminder that tomorrow we'll be talking about Apple Vision Pro. Like, it was released. What are people doing yet? And all of that great conversation happening tomorrow. If you want to learn more about what's taking place for the rest of the week, head over to officehours.global. And let's see how far we went today on the Talak Traversal. That is 101,563 miles and 163,449 kilometers. That's more than 804 million bananas for scales, 4.1 times around the earth. Thank you so much, everyone. And we will see you in after hours on the next show. Bye.
I know we have to get this whispering to be audible. Yeah. Now we can just whisper. We have a whole bunch of things we want AI to say. AI will just give us all the information.
Right.
Yeah. There you go.
All right, y'all. Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Liberty, great job as always. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Stay cool down there.
Trying. Bye, y'all. Jeffrey Alexander.